entertainment purposes, things that are oppressive.
Awesome. Switch. Censored element.
Yep, and yeah, my last slide. I just wanted to note that, so there's been a lot of controversy about some of the Looney Tunes over the course of the last, however many decades they've been around. And they went so far, Warner Brothers went so far as to censor and get rid of at least 11 particular skits that were very, very disparaging towards certain groups like Japanese people, Chinese, German cultures, and so on. They just felt they were too offensive to contemporary audiences. However, as the 20th century drew to a close, the public increasingly became more aware of these censored cartoons, and Warner Brothers felt pressure to release the cartoons. So they've been re-released out to the film catalog, and you can still see them to this day. The way that they dealt with this controversy in these images was by giving a little bit of a caveat, stating basically that while the racial and ethnic stereotypes are harmful and perhaps embarrassing, it's best to show them rather than hide them. So what they did in 2003 when they re-released their golden collection of all of their best films, including the Censor 11, they had a very prominent actor, Whoopi Goldberg, on a disc giving a little speech at the beginning where she says basically it's important, the videos are important because they're part of American culture, but yet she wants to warn the audience that some of the behavior is not acceptable at the time and remains problematic today. So I just want to read you what she says. Briefly, she says, "The cartoons you're about to see are products of their time. They made some of the ethnic and racial prejudices that were commonplace in West society. These depictions were wrong then and they're wrong today. While the following does not represent one of today's society, these cartoons are being presented as they were originally created, because to do otherwise would be the same as claiming that these prejudices never existed." So it's very interesting to me that you have this very famous female black comedian who is saying, these are offensive cartoons based on race and ethnic oppression, but she says nothing about the whole pictures of women, people with disabilities, human animals, and basically anybody who identifies outside of social binaries that we're so used to. So I think that ecosystem theory, giving us a reminder that there's intersectional aspects going on in these shorts that we have to be mindful of, especially if we're showing them to our children. We have to be mindful of that they're a product of the time, and that in order to decrease or stop the vulnerability to these various groups, we have to say that they are and what's going on. So if it were the case that they were to be released again, I would hope that producers, creators, and whoever could, to endorse cartoons, would recognize that more could be said or done about the fact that other groups are being disparaged, all for the purpose of generating a good time and laugh.
Great.
That is my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Cool. So we have about 15 minutes or so. So we'll take a question for each of the individuals. Feel free to raise your hand, and we'll call upon you if you have a question on any of the individuals presented. Okay, there's 1, 2. Okay, so we'll go Kendra and then Mark.
So Sarah, with your statement about the connection between injustices faced by people with disabilities and injustices faced by non-human animals, with that awareness, is your argument that perhaps with that awareness, we can treat animals better as a society? That, hopefully humans will...
I'm not sure it's the connection between the two injustices that's going to improve that awareness. But I do think that if we can understand these different forms of injustice better, that's one step in overcoming the problems, understanding the sources of the problems. And if we find out that some pieces of it overlap in important ways, that's going to help us in both cases. Yeah.
Thanks. Who had the other question?
Go.
Mark,
Yeah, I was just curious, Sarah, seeing you didn't get a chance to finish, like, if you could say, like, give us a quick, like, just a brief description of what you meant by normalcy to fit it together.
Yeah, so I think one helpful way of understanding what's going on with discrimination against people with disabilities is that we have this sense that the way the majority able-bodied people function is normal, and that's a problematic word in my view. And so when people don't function the normal way, they're marginalized. And part of that is because our built world and our social world is built for the majority. And I think inadvertently then excludes the minority who function differently, whether it's communicate differently or move differently or cognitively operate differently. They end up being excluded as a result of that. And so when I say tyranny of normal, I mean, that we build our social world and our physical world for a certain kinds of bodies that function in certain kind of ways that we consider normal, and thereby exclude those who don't.
Then would you argue that we need to just take away the word disability and that will help it, or what is the solution or a possible kind of?
Well, I think as long as ableism is around, you have to have a word for disability, right? But ultimately what you want is a world that's responsive to difference and that's accommodating of differences among human beings without disparaging that difference. And so yeah, ultimately we might move past the word disability. That would be a lovely thing.
Yeah.
But for right now, we kind of need a word to help us understand the discriminatory categories.
one more question if you would like.
Yeah, I got one more. I'm sorry, I remember you from the other conference we had, but I don't remember your name.
I'm Kyle.
Kyle, okay, Kyle. You were talking about I was wondering if you could, like how, with respect to, liberation theology perspectives on the use of sabotage and stuff by, like, say, animal liberation and stuff, if you could just give us sort of like what their perspective is on the use of, like, say, property destruction and those sorts of things.
Yeah, so traditionally, liberation theology, it's typically rooted in experience first. So rather than having kind of a prescriptive, ethical approach that is rooted in like a text or rooted in a truth, the truth comes from experience. So the liberation theologian that I'm pulling from most is a professor at I Love School of Theology, where I currently attend, he creates what he calls a theology of hopelessness, which he talks about the Latinx community and how oppressed communities tend to have no hope in the sense that they live in a world where they have no ability to escape reality, right? Like what he talks about is like every day is a struggle to put food on the table. They don't have time to escape or take a nap or relax and retreat to hide from their oppression. And so typically in those communities, what he's putting forward is the idea that the only way that they can make room to even create hope is by resisting. So what he wants to say is by attacking structures, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, and so I'm trying to make sure I'm not doing that. But I think what he's essentially saying is he constructs what he calls an ethics of para joder, which means screwing with the system. It's more synonymous with fuck than screw, but it means that it's a degrading term meant to disrupt, and I'm comparing a lot of what he's doing with economic sabotage and the idea of resistance and disruption and truly challenging economic and political, like the status quo and things like that. So those connections aren't directly associated. I'm trying to make those connections. As a very privileged white male, I'm trying to figure out what that looks like by drawing on other people's experiences and things like that. So I'm really just searching more than anything. I think if animal theology wants to be grounded in experience rather than in a text or something like that, that we need to kind of get at the root of the problem and see what's being most effective. And to me, I think the most effective form of animal activism is liberating animals from cages, challenging the structures that kind of hold animals captive, based on the idea of, so there's a book called Racism Without Racists, which essentially talks about the idea of we no longer need individuals to be racist. We no longer need individuals to act violently against people of color when the system kind of normalizes it and people can become complacent within a system without ever actually interacting in a negative way with a person of color. That their existence kind of is complicit with a larger structure that dominates and oppresses a certain people group. And so I'm taking sort of that idea as well and applying it to the concept of animal liberation, trying to figure out, well, what does it look like if we actually want to challenge animal oppression? Yes, we need to attack or challenge people's individual views and philosophical views of animals, but also, if we get rid of that, does that actually challenge the structural approach as well? And so I'm trying to kind of figure out the balance between both of those and playing with theological anthropology and those concepts that they work with.
We have flip a coin. Okay, Jess. It was Terry or Jess. So you can arm wrestle. Okay, so.
I'm wondering, how do we, in the West, so much of our belief around animals comes from Judeo-Christian, like from the Bible, where God says that animals are ours to name, right? That's one of the first things that happens in the creation myth, is that we have dominion over animals. So in animal theology then, how do you get past that, or when you have Christians say that kind of rhetoric, right, that's used a lot as a justification, how do we get past that?
And I'll take from there, if you allow me. One of the powerful things of liberation theology is that's practical, but you mentioned liberation theology, theorists, they're talking about animals and Christianity. Is there any practical experience where liberation theology is doing something about animals?
Yeah, so if I can try to answer both of those in one go. So with feminist theology, there was a similar problem when feminist theology began. A lot of feminist scholars went to the text, right? And they started saying, oh, well, Scripture says this, and what other feminist theologies who kind of followed on their heels were saying is, who gives a crap what the text says? Like, we should care about women. It doesn't really matter what this text says. And so something that I'm interested in is moving away from sort of a prescriptive ethical paradigm where we put our ethical values, or we don't allow a specific set of beliefs or truths or text to dictate our ethical, moral considerations in the world. And so one of the ways I'm interested in approaching that, and I haven't done this, and so I'm only speaking from what I would like to do or would like to see others do, and I've seen others do in certain situations, is sort of move away from that prescriptive motif to a more relational motif. And so a lot of the way that people in the West, and the East for that matter, read Scripture and read sacred texts, so it doesn't necessarily just apply to Christianity, but certainly does, is they typically read with a philosophical lens. And so they're reading with Plato, Aristotle, those the great chain of being, like all those things are ingrained in their mind when they're reading these texts. And so the texts tend to lend themselves to be interpreted in the light of Plato, Aristotle, St. Augustine, St. Augustine. And so I think I'm interested in reframing those philosophical presumptions, the metaphysics that are implied when someone reads something, which I think certainly applies there. But to be honest, I think that's a great question. I would like to see people do more research on that, to be honest.
Wonderful. Give them a big old round of applause. So thank you so much. We have 3 people, one more panel, and it's wonderful that people are up here. And this is an intersectional conference. And a gentleman said, and a few other people have said, like, what's the connections of the panels? And Sean and I did this on purpose to, and you did make the connection, the rats and the connections of that. So we want you to do the work, and there's no titles to panels, which is typically the case in conferences. And if we really truly believe that everything is connected, we just hodgepodge through everything together. And then we can see the organicness of liberation and emancipation and total liberation, where we all are kind of speaking about the same thing from a variety of vantage points and perspectives. So again, this is a great example of how sin and disability and normalcy is connected. So thank you so much. At 5 o'clock, hopefully you all stay around. There'll be a No DAPL rally at the clock tower, and there'll be one more panel. So this is a free grassroots conference where you can learn about social justice from a variety of viewpoints. And everyone complains about education being expensive. This is your opportunity. So take care. Thank you so much. Give them a round of applause.